Singapore's sea levels have gone up by about 14 centimeters when compared to before 1970. The data is from the 2019 Annual Climate Assessment Report. Since the 1970s, sea levels at Sembawang, Sultan Shoal and Raffles Lighthouse have seen a rate of increase of between 2.12 mm and 3.55 mm per year. According to the Meteorological Service Singapore, the variations at different sites could be due to reasons like sediment load and building infrastructure.
Globally, sea levels have also been rising faster at an average of 3.24 milliliters per year since 1993. Experts say this is caused by factors like warming oceans as temperatures rise. The effects of global warming were felt in Singapore last year. 2019 shared the title of the hottest year on record here with an annual mean temperature of 28.4 degrees Celsius, matching the year 2016. And it was also the third driest. At the Changi Climate Station, rainfall was 37% below the long-term average recorded between 1981 and 2010.
Now, for more on the Annual Climate Assessment Report, we're joined by Professor Benjamin Horton, chair of NTU's Asian School of the Environment. Ben, good to speak to you again. Firstly, let's start with that record warmest annual mean temperature of 28.4 degrees. This is 0.9 degrees Celsius higher than the average from 1981 to 2010. That's a significant increase, isn't it?
Yes, well, I think it's the latest information regarding climate. So if we look at 2019, it was the warmest year since records began in Singapore. If we look at the last 5 years, they were the warmest 5 years since records began. And if we look at the last decade, they're the warmest decade since records began. So it's a clear trend that we have in Singapore, which is mirrored elsewhere in the planet. The temperatures in Singapore are quite similar to the average global temperatures of the globe.
But we're seeing sea levels rise by an average of 14 centimeters above those pre-1970 levels. Put that in perspective for us.
Well, if we look at the Singapore rates of sea level rise, again, they're quite similar to the global average. And the global average, where we have a longer instrumental record than Singapore. Singapore's only goes back to the 1970s. Globally, we have records that go back to the latter part of the 19th century. And what we've seen is an increasing rate. The rate of sea level rise in the 20th century, if you compare it with geological proxies, show that the rate of sea level rise in the 20th century is faster than anything that has occurred over the previous 3,000 years. If we just look at the 20th century alone, the beginning of the 20th century, sea levels were going up at around 1 millimetre per year. Towards the latter part of the 20th century, they increased to 2 millimetres per year. And now when we're in the 21st century, they're increasing at around 3 to 4 millimetres per year. And as we look through the 21st century towards 2100, not only will our sea levels go up, but they will accelerate.
Ben, Singapore has undertaken a variety of adaptation sort of measures, from managing our mangrove coast to building structures such as seawalls and polders. How effective can these be?
Well, sea level adaptation measures can be very effective if we reduce some of the causes of sea level rise. At low rates of sea level rise, you can protect our shorelines, be that building seawalls, building polders, having green solutions such as regenerating our mangroves. They can mean that we can have a prosperous coastline, an economically viable coastline. But however, if we don't reduce the root cause, which is greenhouse gas emissions, then the rates of sea level change will just be too fast. So if we look at what Singapore's doing at the moment, so it's got a rate of sea level change of around 3 to 4 millimetres per year, and at the moment our sea defences are keeping the waters at bay. Under a low emission scenario, those rates of change may double to around 6 millimetres per year. But I would say that here in Singapore, with our educationally advanced population, that we would be able to adapt to that. But under high emission futures, you're getting rates in this century of 20 to 30 millimetres per year. And there isn't an engineering solution that can solve that particular problem.
Professor, I want to look back to last year, last December specifically. You know, we saw the longest northeast monsoon surge in about 10 years, and it lasted for about 7 days, brought cool, windy and rainy conditions. Can you explain why that happens, and when can we expect something like this to happen again?
Well, expecting when it can happen again, I don't think we can predict that. What it is indicating is that we're getting greater extreme variability. That's something that we've projected with climate, that as you change the climate, you're altering the system, and that's why we get extremes in terms of heat waves. And for example, we saw that in Australia in January, where we had the massive bushfires. In this case, the sort of normal progression of a northeast monsoon with a gradual change in rainfall was very, very abrupt. And as we move into the 21st century, what we can expect is more and more extremes. But being able to project them on a local level really is where the cutting edge of science is. And then that gets back to, again, a key question. Before we adapt our coastlines or our environments in Singapore, we really need to invest in the science so taxpayers' money is not wasted.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. We've been speaking there to Professor Benjamin Horton, Chair of NTU's Asian School of the Environment.